She brought home her friend from school one day. They always ate dinner at 6 o'clock when her father got home from the mines. They sat through dinner silently. They ate quickly. When dinner was over, her father asked her to say goodbye to her friend. As she closed the door, the beating began. "You don't bring niggers into my house," her father said. She moved to Los Angeles when she was 16. It was supposed to be good for her breathing. The doctor said that if she stayed in West Virginia, the humidity would intensify the bronchial asthma and she would die.
His mother died when he was 16. He had stopped going to school 3 years prior to help his father on the farm. The sons took the death hard. His father remarried. His new mom didn't want the old kids around. She wanted to make way for a family of her own. He was kicked out of the house and moved to Los Angeles. He was a welder. He wanted to work on the space shuttle. He worked for the Drug Enforcement Agency and was addicted to speed. The methamphetamine helped him feel alive. It got him past the lethargy he felt in modern society. He became paranoid, worried his colleagues would find out. He chased his youngest son around the kitchen with a butcher's knife, threatening to kill him for being an informant.
She watched her brothers bring home a mason jar filled with whites. They would drink beers in their shared room and punch her so she wouldn't squeal. They would drink the liquor from their parents' cabinet and replace it with water. Her mom would taste it and say, "Looks like it's gone bad. We'd better buy some more." Her high school sweetheart picked her up from her parents' house, the star student athlete. They decided to see a movie together, but first he cooked her dinner. He made a nice steak and covered it with psychedelic mushrooms. They ate together, tripped together, and talked about affection as a language. He was 24, she was 17. He introduced her to new drugs, new people. She began skipping class. They would fuck and he would hit her. She thought it was just this once, and she always forgave him. Her parents saw the marks and told her to leave him. She told them it was her fault and that he was charming, suave, and always made her smile. They made her leave the house, bruises fresh underneath her blouse.
He had a wife, kids, a house on a nice quiet street. The American dream in full bloom. He heard voices, knew the signs from years of watching his father slip further into schizophrenia. He knew the potential of hurting his loved ones. He couldn't bear the fear. He drank himself some courage and crept into his neighbor's fumigation-tinted house. They found him lying dead on his stomach, crawling toward the exit.
She fell in love at Premier Lanes. She was a waitress. He bowled the Open Thursday Night League. He said he worked on cars. He was funny, always trying to make her smile. He took her into Mexico, where the clouds floated backwards over the border.
He would walk down the neighborhood streets looking for cars that were out of place with his cousins. Step 1, pop the hood. Step 2, disconnect the engine from the frame. Step 3, lift the engine out of the car. They said they weren't a gang. He never shot anyone.
She lived in Arizona with him. The desert air dried out her face. The chlorine bleached her scalp. They lived with his brother and his wife. While at work one day, his brother cut off his wife's head. She was told she couldn't go home again. She left her collection of snow globes in the living room. She rushed into her children's room, sweaty panic on her face. She pushed the dresser against the door and told the oldest it was going to be okay. The younger two were coloring with markers on the floor. The door began to bend and bang. She sat in front of the dresser, leveraging herself between the bunk bed and the barricade. She yelled his name, pleading for an end. Cruiser lights illuminated through the bedroom window and she peered out to the men below. "He says he has a gun. Lower down the children." The door stopped bending and banging. She left the markers loose on the floor. The backyard was covered in an elaborate pond. Fake frogs and rocks hugged the contours of the yard. The lush grass had the good fortune of beating heat and drought. There were tables covered in miniature carnival rides made by hand. It was the home of 3 generations. Dozens of holidays and weekend get-togethers culminated within the fenced-in yard. She remembers the yard just as dirt. She remembers the growth.
He got caught with a fan belt in his hands and went to prison. She was lonely and needed someone to take care of her children. She got high on speed and worked 16 to 18 hours a day. Her dealer was a gangly man, a user for years. He was neurotically punctual and wore his hair perfectly parted. She said that she loved him and they moved in together. They wouldn't sleep at night. They talked about love as a complex system of pulleys.
They got married in the summer. She wore a white dress and was pregnant. It was her first marriage. She smiled under the terrace. The sky was filled with the remnants of a June gloom. The pond reflected a calm shine. Her daughter carried the flowers, her son the rings. She held her husband's hand, smiling under the terrace.
She woke up as a watering can. There were flowers all around her. She walked down the main staircase, past her brother's room, and watered the chrysanthemums. "Pull up your pants," her mother yelled from the second floor. She awoke embarrassed, soaked in urine.
They would go to the park on Sunday mornings and talk about God as a state of being.
She needed money to pay the rent on their new house. She worked, but the tips weren't enough. She began selling speed to help pay the bills. If she didn't make enough, he would hit her and threaten to turn her in. Soon enough, she was serving 4 months for possession. He took the kids and moved to Arizona.
She had known him from her own town. He had long brown hair that reminded her of her high school lovers. They frequented the same bars, had the same friends. He knew she was married, and she knew he had a kid. They would talk, but never made much out of the chit-chat between them. They talked about marriage as a tidy stream.
She had been awake for days when she landed in the Mesa airport. She took a taxi to his front door, her children's bags packed for Iowa. He had said that he was going to keep them, that he would file a custody suit, that she was unfit to parent. She picked up her youngest, took all the clothes she could carry, and took off to the middle school. It was lunchtime when she arrived at the gates of the school. The principal took her right to her children. They cried as they wrapped their arms around her. They cried as they boarded the plane. He never filed for custody.
He moved out to Iowa just a few months later, his long brown hair tied tight in a ponytail. She made him promise that he was clean, no more drugs. Their talks became more honest. They would laugh together and cry together. The withdrawal was hard for both of them. They gained a lot of weight. They were depressed. They missed their families, but they had each other and the children. They talked about existence as a series of second chances. He was 16 years old, alone, depressed, fed up. His mother screamed at him to get out of the house, to get a girlfriend. He screamed back, "Mom, I'm gay." They would fight when they drank. He smacked her in the face in front of her youngest. He would cover his ears and scream pages from Genesis, hoping the hitting would stop. She was 16 years old, alone, depressed, scared. Her mother screamed at her that she wasn't old enough to be a mom, that she should have used protection. She cried, not knowing what to say.
She traveled to the West Coast. Her brother died of a heart attack.
He died of hepatitis C. He was beaten to death outside of a bar.
They would fight all the time. He threw a chair at her youngest. It knocked him to the ground and he started to scream.
He smashed all of her snow globes.
He died of chronic liver failure. She died of lung cancer. He walked into the garage one day to look at his stepdad's Hustler magazines. He opened the door and heard the whirring of an engine. He could see a brown ponytail underneath a layer of fog inside the truck. He called 911.
They pumped the pills from his stomach. They pumped the pills from her stomach.
They bandaged his wrist.
They pumped the pills from her stomach.
The backyard was paved over.
The pond was gone.
She left him in the back seat of a police cruiser as he went to jail on domestic violence charges. Her 2 oldest had moved out, her daughter with 2 daughters of her own, her son to college. Her and her youngest found refuge in several friends' homes until she could afford a place of her own. She told him thank you and that he was brave. He missed his brother and sister.
He was tall, burly, a Harley-Davidson man. They met at the cove where he would go to watch his youngest play pool and where she worked as a bartender. He would treat her kind. He didn't want her for her body nor for the drugs. They got to know each other. He offered his home to them. He lived all alone. Her youngest had a dog for the first time. The three lived together, traveled together, and talked about life as a dirty laundry hamper. They bought a new house.
He went to college.
She had another daughter. 2 more daughters.
He got a promotion.
The grass grew through the cracks in the cement, and they talked about it.